Michael Reeves squinted through the windshield of his aging Ford pickup as rain hammered against the glass. The mountain road twisted ahead of him, barely visible through sheets of water that his wipers struggled to clear. He was beginning to regret his decision to take the scenic route back to Bozeman after visiting his sister in Billings. The storm had appeared suddenly, transforming the beautiful Montana landscape into a treacherous maze of slick asphalt and limited visibility. At 52, Michael had seen his share of difficult journeys. 20 years as a paramedic in Chicago had taught him to remain calm in crisis, though he'd left that life behind 3 years ago after his wife's death. The move to Montana had been an attempt to outrun grief, to find solace in open spaces and simpler living. Most days it worked. Today, as thunder cracked overhead and the road vanished into fog and rain, he felt a familiar clench of anxiety in his chest. "Just find somewhere to wait it out," he muttered to himself, scanning the roadside for a turnout or shelter. The rain intensified, and Michael slowed to a crawl, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the landscape around him. Dense pine forest on one side, a steep drop on the other. In that flash of brightness, something caught his eye, a splash of color on the roadside up ahead that seemed out of place among the greens and browns of the natural world. Michael inched forward, peering through the rain. As he drew closer, the shape resolved itself into something that made his breath catch in his throat. Just off the shoulder of the road lay what appeared to be a small, crumpled form. His paramedic instincts took over immediately. Michael pulled onto the shoulder, emergency flashers blinking into the gloom. He grabbed his raincoat and the emergency medical kit he still carried out of habit and stepped into the deluge. If this story of quiet honor is touching your heart, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to No Filter America. Your support helps us share more true stories about dignity, compassion, and the power of doing what's right. The rain soaked through Michael's clothes within seconds as he approached the roadside. What he had glimpsed from his truck was now unmistakable. A small body, face down in the mud. A child, he realized with a sinking heart. A little girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, wearing a bright red jacket that had caught his attention in the lightning flash. "Hey there," he called, though he already suspected there would be no response. "Can you hear me?" Kneeling beside her, Michael gently placed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse he knew wouldn't be there. Her skin was cool to the touch, her body motionless. With practiced care, he turned her over, revealing a face of striking beauty, despite the mud that streaked her copper skin and black hair. Her features suggested Native American heritage, her clothing simple but well-made. There were no obvious signs of trauma, no blood or visible injuries. Michael sat back on his heels, rain cascading down his face, mixing with unexpected tears. In his years as a paramedic, he had witnessed countless deaths, had pronounced many beyond help, but the loss of a child never became easier. This one, alone on a mountain road in a storm, struck him particularly hard. "What happened to you?" he whispered. "Where is your family?" Looking around, he saw no sign of a vehicle crash, no indication of what might have brought this child to this remote stretch of road. The girl carried no identification, no backpack, nothing to provide clues to her identity. Just a small beaded bracelet on her wrist and a carved wooden pendant around her neck. A stylized bear, he noticed, crafted with obvious care and artistry. Michael knew the protocol. He should call the authorities, wait in his truck until they arrived, let them handle the situation. The rational part of his brain was already reaching for his phone. But something stopped him, a feeling he couldn't articulate, a sense that this child deserved more than a lie in the rain until officials arrived. With gentle hands, he lifted her small body. She weighed almost nothing in his arms as he carried her to his truck and carefully placed her in the passenger seat, sheltered from the rain at last. He took a moment to study her face more carefully. There was a serenity to her expression that belied the tragedy of a life cut short. The storm showed no signs of abating. Cell service was non-existent in this remote area. The nearest town was at least 30 miles ahead, the previous one 40 miles behind. "I'll take you with me," Michael decided, speaking aloud as if the child might hear. "Find help in the next town." As he pulled back onto the road, Crawling forward to the storm, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had happened, that this chance encounter on a rain-swept mountain road would change the course of his life in ways he couldn't yet understand. Chapter 3. Sacred ground 10 miles further along the winding road. The storm began to ease. Rain still fell, but the thunder had moved on, and visibility had improved enough for Michael to make out more of his surroundings. The road had taken him higher into mountains, away from the main highway and deeper into wilderness than he had intended to go. A small dirt track appeared on the right, leading into the forest. A wooden sign, weathered and barely legible, marked it as Eagle Creek Trail. Something compelled Michael to turn onto it, a decision he couldn't later explain even to himself. The truck bumped along the rough path for nearly a mile before the trees opened into a small clearing. Michael stopped the engine and sat in silence, looking out at what seemed to be an ancient meadow surrounded by towering pines. Despite the rain, there was a quality of peace here, of timelessness. At the far end of the clearing, a massive boulder rose in the earth, its surface etched with faded pictographs barely visible in the fading light. "Is this where you're from?" he asked the still form beside him. "Is this where you belong?" No answer came, of course, but Michael felt a certainty growing within him. This place wasn't a random stopping point. Somehow, he had been guided here. With renewed purpose, Michael stepped out of the truck. The rain had softened to a gentle mist, and the air smelled of pine and wet earth. He spent the next hour exploring the clearing, looking for signs of habitation, or any clue to the girl's identity. He found nothing but more ancient pictographs on smaller stones, images of animals, people, and symbols he didn't recognize. As darkness approached, Michael made a decision that went against all conventional wisdom, against the procedures he'd followed throughout his professional life. Instead of continuing to the next town, instead of calling authorities at the first opportunity, he would lay this unknown child to rest here, in this peaceful clearing that seemed to welcome her. "I don't know if this is right," he said aloud, "but it feels right." Using a small folding shovel from his emergency kit, Michael began to dig in the soft earth near the large boulder. The work was physically demanding, but there was a meditative quality to it, a sense of purpose that pushed away his exhaustion. As he dug, he spoke to the girl, telling her about his life, his work as a paramedic, his wife Sarah who had died of cancer, his move to Montana to heal. "I think Sarah would approve of this," he said, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow despite the cool evening air. "She always said we need to follow our hearts in the moments that matter most." When the grave was ready, Michael returned his truck. With infinite gentleness, he wrapped the child in a clean blanket he kept behind the seat. He carried her to the graveside and carefully laid her in the earth, making sure the wooden bear pendant remained with her. "I don't know your prayers," he said softly, "or your people's ways, but I promise you won't be forgotten." Michael filled the grave and gathered stones to mark it, creating a small cairn that would endure long after he was gone. By the time he finished, night had fully descended. The clouds had cleared, and stars filled the sky with impossible brightness. Too exhausted to continue his journey, he decided to sleep in his truck and proceed at first light. As he drifted toward sleep, a strange peace settled over him, a feeling that despite the tragedy he had encountered, he had done something necessary and right. His last thought before consciousness faded was of the wooden bear pendant, and he wondered what significance it held, what story it told about the little girl who now lay beneath the Montana soil. Chapter 4. Dreaming of bears, Michael awoke to the sound of birdsong. For a moment he was disoriented, stiff from sleeping in the cramped confines of his truck cab. Dawn light filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the meadow. The events of the previous day rushed back, the storm, the child, the burial, and he sat up, rubbing his face with callous hands. His dreams had been vivid and strange. In them, he had followed a large bear through dense forest. The animal occasionally turned to look at him with eyes that seemed almost human. The bear had led him to a village nestled in a valley, where people with faces he couldn't quite remember had welcomed him with solemn ceremony. He had woken just as a woman had stepped forward to speak to him, her words lost in the transition to wakefulness. "Just a dream," he murmured, reaching for the water bottle in his cup holder. The meadow looked different in the morning light, more vibrant, more obviously sacred. The pictographs on the boulder caught the early sun, their red ochre pigments standing out against the gray stone. The small cairn he had built over the girl's grave seemed to belong there, as if it had always been part of this ancient place. Michael stepped out of the truck, stretching his aching muscles. The air was crisp and clean after the storm, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. He walked the graveside and stood in silence, paying his respects one final time before continuing his journey. "I hope you're at peace," he said softly. "I'm sorry I couldn't do more." As he turned back toward his truck, Michael froze. A sound had reached him, faint but unmistakable. Voices, singing, coming from a trail that led back to the road. Michael tensed, suddenly aware of how his actions might appear to others. He had buried a child without reporting her death, had made decisions that could be seen as interference or worse. The rational part of his brain urged him to leave quickly to avoid potential complications. But something stronger kept him rooted in place, a sense that his part in this story wasn't finished yet. The singing grew louder, a haunting melody unlike anything Michael had heard before. Within minutes, figures appeared at the edge of the clearing. First one, then three, then a dozen or more. Men and women of various ages, all clearly Native American, dressed in a mixture of traditional and modern clothing. They moved with purpose, with dignity, their faces solemn as they entered the sacred space. At their head walked an elderly man whose bearing suggested authority. Beside him, a woman of similar age carried a bundle of herbs that released fragrant smoke as she moved. Behind them came others carrying various ceremonial items: drums, staffs adorned with feathers, small bundles wrapped in hide. They showed no surprise at Michael's presence, as if they'd expected to find him there. Instead, their eyes moved to the cairn of stones, recognizing immediately what it signified. Chapter 5. The Bear Clan of the procession stopped several yards from where Michael stood. The elderly man stepped forward, his dark eyes assessing Michael with an intensity that seemed to peer into his soul. He wore a necklace similar to the pendant Michael had found on the girl, a carved wooden bear, though more elaborate, inlaid with turquoise and shell. "You are the one who found her," the man said. It wasn't a question. Michael nodded, uncertain how to respond, how these people had known to come here. "Yes, in the storm yesterday. She was already gone." The elder nodded, his expression revealing a deep sadness but no surprise. "I am Joseph Running Bear, elder of the Bear Clan of the Blackfeet Nation. The child you found was my great-granddaughter, Lily." Michael felt a wave of emotion hearing the girl's name. Lily, not an unknown child anymore, but a person with a name, with family who'd been searching for her. "I'm Michael Reeves," he replied. "I'm sorry for your loss. I should have reported it, taken her to authorities. But something told me she belonged here." Joseph studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "You were guided. The bear spirit walks with you, though you may not know it yet." The woman with the smoking herbs, sweetgrass, Michael now recognized from his time in Montana, approached and circled him, wafting the fragrant smoke around his body in what he understood to be a cleansing ritual. "I am Margaret Running Bear, Joseph's wife," she introduced herself. "We have been searching for Lily since she wandered away from our family camp 2 days ago. We followed her spirit trail to this place, the ancient gathering ground of our people." Michael listened in wonder as Joseph explained that Lily had been part of a family gathering in a nearby valley, a reunion of the Bear Clan, one branch of Blackfeet tribe that traced their lineage to a legendary encounter between their ancestor and a great bear spirit. Lily had slipped away during an afternoon hike, perhaps following an animal or simply exploring as children do. The storm had hampered search efforts, and by the time they had organized a wider search, night had fallen. "How did you know to come here?" Michael asked. "How did you know about?" He gestured toward the grave. Joseph exchanged a glance with Margaret before answering. "Our medicine woman had a vision. She saw Lily's spirit at peace, and she saw a stranger with the mark of the healer about him who performed the sacred duty of burial. She saw this place, which has been sacred to our people for many generations." As if on cue, an older woman stepped forward from the group. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes bright with intelligence that made Michael think of his former mentors in emergency medicine, People who saw more, understood more than those around them. "I am Clara Watersinger," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "The vision came to me at dawn. I saw you, sleeping in your vehicle, watched over by the spirit bear. I saw what you did for our Lily, the care you took, the respect you showed." She studied his face intently. "You have walked with death before. You have guided many souls to the other side." Michael swallowed hard, unsettled by her accuracy. "I was a paramedic for 20 years. Clara nodded, satisfied. "A healer." The spirits recognized their own, even across different traditions. Chapter 6. Ceremony of Gratitude. The sun had fully risen now, bathing the meadow in golden light. More members of the Bear clan had arrived, forming a circle around the grave site. Michael watched in respectful silence as Joseph and Margaret prepared for a ceremony, laying out items on a blanket beside the cairn. A small drum, bundles of herbs, a pipe wrapped in soft hide, and various personal items that must have belonged to Lily. Joseph approached Michael again. "We have come to perform the proper ceremonies for Lily's journey to the spirit world. But first, we wish to honor you for what you have done." "That's not necessary," Michael protested. "Anyone would have—" "No," Joseph interrupted gently. "Not anyone would have stopped. Not anyone would have treated her with such dignity. Not anyone would have been guided to the sacred place that has been significant to our clan for countless generations." Margaret joined them, carrying a beautifully crafted leather pouch suspended on a beaded cord. "This is a medicine bag," she explained. "Inside are sacred items of the Bear clan. A small carved bear fetish that has been in our family for 7 generations, a piece of obsidian from the mountains where our stories began, sage and sweetgrass for cleansing, and a pinch of tobacco for prayers." "I can't accept that," Michael said, overwhelmed by the significance of such a gift. "It belongs with your family." "You are now connected to our family," Joseph said simply. "What you did for Lily, you did for all of us. The medicine bag is not given lightly, but the spirits have made their wishes clear." Clara Watersinger approached, her keen eyes studying Michael's face. "There is something else," she said. "Something you have not told us about why you stopped, why you chose to bury her here." Michael hesitated, then nodded slowly. "My wife, Sarah, she died 3 years ago. Cancer. The doctors did everything they could, but in the end—" He paused, collecting himself. "In her final days, she made me promise that when her time came, I wouldn't let her die in a hospital. I brought her to a meadow like this one, with a view of the mountains. She died in my arms at sunset. The admission cost him, bringing back the sharp edge of grief he had worked so hard to dull. But there was something cleansing in speaking the words here, among people who seemed to understand the deeper currents of life and death. So you recognize what needed to be done for Lily," Clara said softly. "Your heart remembered." Joseph placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, a gesture of comfort and connection that transcended cultural differences. "Now you understand why you were guided here. Why, of all people, you were the one to find our Lily." As the morning progressed, Michael was invited to observe the clan's ceremonies from a respectful distance. They sang songs in their native language, prayers that rose and fell like the wind through pine branches. They burned offerings for Lily's spirit journey, small tokens and symbols whose meaning Michael could only guess at. They spoke her name with love, sharing memories of her short life, her laughter, her curiosity, her special connection to the natural world. Through it all, Michael felt a sense of privilege at being allowed to witness such intimate grief, such profound spiritual expression. The ritual had a structure and meaning that had been missing from his own experience of loss, a framework for understanding death not as an ending, but as a transition, a journey to another state of being. As the ceremony neared its conclusion, Joseph called Michael forward. The entire clan, some 30 people of all ages, formed a circle around him and the grave. Joseph spoke in his native language, then translated for Michael's benefit. "We ask for blessings upon this man, who honored our daughter when he did not know her name or her people. We ask the spirits to walk with him and guide him as he guided our Lily with respect and care. We acknowledge him as a friend of the Bear clan, now and for all days to come." One by one, beginning with the eldest members and proceeding to the youngest, each person approached Michael. Some simply touched his hand, or arm in a gesture of gratitude. Others spoke brief words of thanks. A young woman who introduced herself as Lily's mother embraced him, her tears soaking into his shirt. An older boy, perhaps 12 or 13, handed him a small carved bear, clearly made by young hands but crafted with genuine skill. By the time the last clan member had acknowledged him, the sun was high in the sky. Michael felt transformed by the experience, as if some hard shell around his heart had begun to crack open, allowing light to enter places that had been dark for too long. What he didn't yet know, as he stood among these people who had so unexpectedly entered his life, was that the ceremony he had just witnessed was only the beginning. The connection formed in this meadow would lead him down paths he could never have anticipated when he set out on a simple drive home to the mountains of Montana. Chapter 7. An invitation. As the ceremony concluded, the Bear Clan began to gather their ceremonial items. The mood had shifted subtly, the deep grief still present, but now contained within a framework of tradition and acceptance. Michael stood somewhat apart, uncertain of his place now that the formal acknowledgments had ended. Joseph approached him again, accompanied by a man in his 30s who had been introduced earlier as Thomas Running Bear, Joseph's grandson and Lily's uncle. "You have a long drive ahead?" Joseph asked. Michael nodded. "Back to Bozeman. I should probably get going soon." Thomas and Joseph exchanged a glance. "Before you leave," Thomas said, "we would like to invite you to come to our family's land. It's not far, about an hour's drive from here. We're gathering there for 3 days to complete the mourning ceremonies for Lily." Michael hesitated. "I wouldn't want to intrude on your family's grief." "It is not an intrusion," Joseph assured him. "It is a continuation of what began here. There are conversations that should happen, things you should understand about the connection that has been formed." Clara Watersinger joined them, her perceptive eyes studying Michael. "You have been alone with your grief for too long," she said, with the directness of someone accustomed to speaking difficult truths. "The spirits have brought you to us for a reason. That reason is not yet fulfilled." Michael felt the weight of her words. His life in Bozeman was solitary by design, a small apartment, a part-time job as an EMT instructor at the community college. Few social connections. Nothing urgent awaited his return. "All right," he agreed finally. "I'll come." The drive to the Running Bear family land took them deeper into the mountains, following roads that grew progressively narrower and rougher. Michael followed Thomas's truck, with Joseph riding as a passenger. They spoke little during the journey, but the silence was comfortable, reflective rather than awkward. The Running Bear property proved to be a beautiful valley nestled between two mountain ridges. Several cabins and traditional structures were arranged around a central clearing, with a creek running along one edge. More members of the extended family had gathered here, preparing for the arrival of those returning from the burial site. Michael was shown to a small guest cabin and told to rest until evening, when a community meal would be held. As he settled onto the simple bed, exhaustion from the emotional events of the past 24 hours washed over him, and he fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Chapter 8. Healing Circle's evening brought the community together around a large fire in the central clearing. Food was abundant. Traditional dishes alongside modern fare, shared with a generosity that seemed to be a fundamental value of the clan. Michael found himself welcomed not as an outsider but as an honored guest, included in conversations, introduced to family members, gradually learning the complex web of relationships that formed the Bear Clan. After the meal, Joseph invited Michael to join a smaller gathering in a circular structure he called the Council Lodge. Inside, about 20 of the clan's adult members sat in a circle on cushions and blankets spread on the earthen floor. At Joseph's gesture, Michael took a place in the circle between Thomas and an older woman named Helen, who had been introduced as one of the clan's historians. "Tonight," Joseph began, "we share stories, as our people have always done. Stories of Lily, so that her memory lives on. Stories of our clan, so that our visitor understands whose lives he has touched. And perhaps, if he is willing, our friend Michael will share his own story." What followed was one of the most profound experiences of Michael's life. One by one, family members spoke of Lily, Her birth during a snowstorm 6 years ago, her first steps taken toward her grandfather's outstretched arms, her special affinity for animals, particularly bears, which had seemed to recognize her even as a small child. Then came stories of the bear clan itself. Its origin centuries ago when, according to tradition, a young hunter had been saved by a great bear who taught him the secrets of healing plants before sending him back to his people with new knowledge and a new identity. Through generations, the clan had maintained a special relationship with bears and a tradition of producing healers, medicine people, and those with the gift of dreams that revealed hidden truths. When it came Michael's turn to speak, he found himself telling these relative strangers things he had never fully articulated even to himself, about his years as a paramedic in Chicago's toughest neighborhoods, about meeting Sarah in the emergency room where she worked as a nurse, about their dreams of children that were never realized, about her illness and how it had transformed both of them. After she died, Michael said, his voice low but steady, I couldn't stay in Chicago. Everything reminded me of her. I came to Montana because we had vacationed here once, and she had loved the mountains. I thought I was just running away, but now I wonder if I was being guided here all along. Clara Water, Singer nodded from across the circle. The spirits work in patterns we cannot always see until we look backward along our path. As the night deepened, the conversation shifted to what Joseph called the path forward. Thomas spoke of challenges facing the reservation, healthcare shortages, educational needs, the struggle to maintain cultural traditions while adapting to modern realities. Our clinic has been without a full-time paramedic for 8 months, he explained. Michael learned that Thomas served as the reservation's health coordinator, overseeing its small medical facility. Our people often must travel over an hour to reach emergency care. We lose lives that could be saved with faster intervention. Michael listened, understanding that beneath the factual discussion lay an unspoken question. When Helen directly asked if he might consider spending some time teaching emergency medical skills to tribal members, he found himself open to the possibility in a way that surprised him. I could do that, he said thoughtfully. I'm only teaching part-time in Bozeman anyway. The conversation continued late into the night, touching on practical matters and spiritual ones, weaving together the immediate needs of community with the deeper significance of Michael's encounter with Lily. By the time the circle broke up, a plan had begun to take shape, not one that had been explicitly stated, but one that seemed to emerge organically from their shared stories and concerns. Chapter 9. The Bear's Path. Over the next 2 days, Michael was included in the clan's morning ceremonies for Lily. He observed some rituals from a respectful distance and was invited to participate directly in others. He learned more about Blackfeet traditions, about the Bear clan's particular customs and beliefs, about the spiritual significance of his chance encounter on that storm-swept road. On the morning of the 3rd day, the day he had planned to return to Bozeman, Michael woke early and walked to a small ridge overlooking the valley. The sun was just beginning to illuminate the mountain peaks, casting long shadows across the land below. He carried with him the medicine bag he had been given, still overwhelmed by its significance, but beginning to understand the responsibility it represented. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Clara Waters' Singer approaching, moving with surprising agility, despite her age. "You're leaving today," she said. Not a question. "Yes," Michael replied. "I need to get back, arrange some things." Clara nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "But you will return." Again, not a question. Michael realized that she, perhaps more than anyone, understood the transformation that had begun within him. "I think I will," he acknowledged. "Thomas offered me a position at the clinic, at least temporarily. 3 months to start, teaching emergency response, helping with the day-to-day operations. And after that?" Michael considered the question. 3 days ago, his life had seemed set in its solitary pattern. Teaching classes, living quietly, moving through each day with a dull ache of loss as his constant companion. Now, possibilities he hadn't imagined were opening before him. "I don't know," he admitted. "For the first time in years, I don't feel like I need to have it all mapped out." Clara smiled, satisfaction evident in her expression. "That is the beginning of wisdom." She reached out and placed a weather hand on the medicine bag he carried. "This connects you to us now, to our past and our future. The bear spirit does not make mistakes in choosing its people. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sunlight spread across the valley. Below, the clan's encampment was coming to life, smoke rising from cooking fires, children's voices carrying on the clear morning air. When Sarah died, Michael said finally, "I thought that was the end of my story, that everything meaningful in my life was behind me." "Death is never the end of the story," Clara replied. "It is only a turning of the page." Later that morning, as Michael prepared to leave, the entire clan gathered to see him off. Joseph presented him with a final gift, a carved walking stick topped with a bear's head, the wood polished by generations of hands. "This belonged to my father and his father before him," Joseph explained. "It is given to those who walk between worlds, between the physical and spiritual, between different cultures and ways of knowing. I believe it belongs with you now." Michael accepted it with deep gratitude, understanding that with such gifts came responsibilities he was only beginning to comprehend. As he drove away, looking in his rearview mirror at the assembled clan members waving farewell, Michael reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had led him here. A storm, a roadside discovery, an instinct that had guided him to an ancient sacred place. A child he had never known in life, but whose death had opened a door to a community he now felt inexplicably part of. 6 weeks later, Michael moved into a small cabin on the reservation, beginning his work at the clinic with a sense of purpose he had thought lost forever. He brought few possessions from his Bozeman apartment: clothes, books, his paramedic equipment, and a photograph of Sarah that he placed beside his bed. To these he added his new treasures: the medicine bag he now wore daily, the walking stick that accompanied him on increasingly frequent hikes into mountains, and a growing collection of carved bears gifted to him by clan members. The dreams that had begun in the meadow continued, evolving into what Clara called teaching dreams, visions that connected him to the bear spirit that had apparently chosen him, though he still struggled to fully understand what that meant. Under Clara's guidance, he began to recognize the healing abilities that had always been part of his medical training, but now expanded into realms of intuition and spiritual insight he would once have dismissed. On the 1-year anniversary of finding Lily, Michael returned to the meadow where he had buried her. The clan accompanied him, but gave him privacy as he approached the cairn, which was now adorned with small offerings and mementos, evidence of regular visits by those who loved her. "I didn't know when I stopped that day," he said softly to the silent stones, "that I was really starting something, that in trying to honor your journey I would find my own." From the forest edge came a sound that made Michael's breath catch, the distinctive huffing of a large bear. He turned slowly to see a massive grizzly standing at the tree line, watching him with intelligent eyes. Fear rose instinctively, then subsided as he remembered Clara's teachings about the clan's special relationship with these powerful creatures. The bear studied him for a long moment, then turned and disappeared into the forest. Michael stood motionless, understanding that he had just received a sign that even his rational, medically trained mind couldn't dismiss. When he rejoined the clan members waiting at a respectful distance, Joseph took one look at his face and nodded in understanding. "Now you believe," the elder said simply. "Now I believe," Michael agreed. In the years that followed, Michael Reeves became known throughout the region as a healer who bridged worlds, bringing modern medical knowledge to the reservation while honoring and learning from traditional practices. The cabin became his permanent home, the Bear Clan his family. He never married again, but his life was rich with connections, purpose, and a sense of belonging that had once seemed lost forever. And always, he remembered the storm-swept road, the small body in the red jacket, and the decision to stop, a moment of compassion that had unexpectedly brought him home. And now, we'd love to hear from you. What do you think this moment meant to her people and to him? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, like this video, subscribe to No Filter America, and help us keep these unforgettable stories alive.